if you're having a bad day, it will pass. The sooner people realize that it's not always perfect, but it's not always bad either, I think life just gets easier. I think it gets better when you understand that.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good morning, Tyson Franklin. Previously, episode 1399 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 2 months, 9 days, 9 hours, and 15 minutes, plus or minus a bit, since we last had that recorded conversation. Tyson, my friend, when we did speak, we covered a ton. I think there's so much to be said and only a little time, just 12 minutes. But I do thank you for coming back onto the podcast. So please give us an update. What's new in your world?
Well, thank you for inviting me back, which is great. It means that I didn't disappoint the first time, which is always a good sign. I always say that people, if you get to become a repeat offender, that's a good sign.
Now, I did see that you are doing repeat podcast episodes as well, right? How's that been going, the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast itself, it's No Secret with Dr. T. So that podcast I kicked off in, August 2017. So, it's been over 2 years, sort of getting close to episode 200. Most of them all recorded leading up to that. And it's been fun. It's been a real experience. But over this Christmas period, I thought, I'm going to have a bit of a break. And when I was talking to people and I'd mentioned some of the most popular shows and I'd ask people if they'd heard them. And they went, well, no, actually, I started listening to it like, say, episode 140 or 120. And I've gone, I'll go back and listen to, say, episode 2 or episode 3. So I decided I'm just going to do a couple of weeks just rebroadcasting some of the older episodes because they were so good and some of the information was so good. I thought it's just worth repeating.
I love that. I think it's a great idea to ensure that the people that are listening get value for what they're listening. When we did speak, so there were 2 books that were out, but we ran over a major part of what you were saying, which is podiatry. You practice podiatry. And I think that's such of an integral aspect to who you are. Please tell us more about how that works.
Well, what's interesting about the podiatry aspect is I started a second podcast exactly a year ago today. I started another podcast called the Podiatry Legends Podcast. And so it's pretty much, I'm a podiatrist, so I'm the host. All my guests are podiatrists, and we talk about podiatry, just their careers, their journey, the interesting things they're doing. So what's funny is that podcast has actually become more popular than my original podcast.
It's not surprising, isn't it?
It's because it's niched.
Well as you've sharpened your saw, right?
Yeah, and it has been one of those things where there's been a bit of talk recently with myself, because I do talk to myself a lot, about even my original podcast, do I continue it much further or do I concentrate on the Podiatry Legends podcast because it gets far more traction and it's in such a niche market. And I do a lot of speaking around, there's riches and niches. So I'm at an interesting crossroad at the moment.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's important not to burn the bridges that we've crossed. However, scaling down possibly might be a better move. But how does it go? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
Because some things are unmeasurable, because traction comes sometimes in places that you aren't able to measure, or the way it's happening. It's not as easy to look at statistics via downloads and really understand what's happening in terms of the connectivity or the glue. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you mean. And that's why even there's No Secret Dr. T, the reason I hadn't stopped it 6 months ago was because the connections that I keep making through there, different people you meet, and it was through that podcast that we connected in the first place.
Yeah, which was great. And I appreciate you because connecting to you, and you are a natural connector, as well as going deeper. I believe you're naturally caring. And I wondered if the connection to podiatry, to working with someone's feet, do you believe that in itself is a humbling process?
Oh, I think it takes a certain type of person to want to touch somebody else's foot.
I agree.
And it's also, I think anybody that's in the healthcare industry, you've got to want to help people in one way or another. It's not the sort of industry that you go in and you stay in just because, I make money from it, so I'm going to keep doing it. there has to be a certain level of care factor in there that you want to get results for people. And I say there's nothing better than when you get a 12-year-old kid will come into the clinic and they can't play sport and they're upset about it, and you do something, and 4 or 5 weeks later they're back out there on a football field having a great time, and you're thinking, wow, yeah, I've changed that person's life.
Was there a separation of time where what you were doing became closer to your heart, specifically when you began seeing about yourself? Because I remember in our conversation, you spoke about the mornings, right? When you started working with the book and getting up earlier than you would usually get up. And then there were the morning rituals that you were doing. Did you see a connection to helping yourself, serving yourself, and that helping you serve others even better?
Yeah, I think now that I've stepped away from the clinic, that, like I sold my last podiatry clinic, and now that I'm sort of concentrating more on the business side of things, like I worked as a podiatrist for 30 years, and I think most people, it doesn't matter what you do, it has its, I think it has its use by date. That I got to the point where I didn't feel like being in the clinic. I felt I'd given all I could give, but I still felt I could give something back to the profession. And that's why, even starting the podcast and now doing, business coaching for other podiatrists, I'm still involved in the profession, but I'm sitting sort of like just in a different space now, I think.
Now, you wrote 2 books. It's no secret, right? There's Money in Podiatry. And then you went again. You basically worked that out from the entrepreneur perspective, and you wrote that again in 2017. Is another book going to be coming out now with the wealth of knowledge you're gathering?
Yes. I'm in the process of writing the 3rd book, and the 3rd book is basically going back towards podiatry. So it's going to be a podiatry marketing book, and the title may even just be called Podiatry Marketing. I haven't quite worked on the title yet, because it was one of those things when I did the first book, It's No Secret There's Money in Podiatry, and then I did the second book, It's No Secret There's Money in Small Business. The interesting part is the podiatry book sells 4 to 5 times more than the second book, and the second book is probably a better book than the first book. But once again, because it's in a niche, that it just automatically sells more.
There are family members around, right? Last time we spoke, you were married and there were 3 children. How have what you've been doing affected them?
It's hard to say. I'm a grandfather since I saw you last.
Congratulations. Wow.
Yes, my grandson is called Silas. So my oldest daughter, he was born on the 20th of November, 2019. So that was pretty cool.
Did you say the 20th?
Yeah, 20th of November.
Oh, that's cool. That's my son's birthday, also my first son's birthday.
And what's funny, my mum's birthday is the 19th of November. And she kept saying, squeeze it out early. So with everything I've been doing, I would say, I think my children look at me. I think I make them believe that anything is possible. If they're prepared to put the work and the time in, they can achieve anything if that's what they really want to do.
I'm guessing there's a physical side to you as well. I mean, before you even got on here, you were telling me, well, I just finished kickboxing, right? How does that help you? Or is that something that's a hobby? Or is it something that is connected to the way you drive hard when you're driving?
I just think staying active and fit, especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business person, it's so easy to just keep working, burn the candle at both ends, eat poorly, drink too much, and not look after your health. And when I turned 50, I did that walking challenge when I walked an hour a day every day for 365 days. So I think you just get to a certain age where you realize, if I don't start getting in shape now and start getting active and staying fit, it's going to be much harder to do when I'm 60.
I think the maths works out there pretty well.
Yeah, like I every time if I see a picture of you, you always look fit and healthy.
Well, I do focus on the balance aspect of life, and I believe it is important to serve more people. It's very necessary to serve yourself and not be from a selfish place, but a selfless place. And I think many of us think that we need to sacrifice everything to get one thing quickly. I think that's something that happens. So I've decided to go slowly from the perspective of what I want to get. However, keeping balance is very, very important to me. Very, very important.
Well, I think we get a reminder every time we're on an airplane. What do they tell us? Put your mask on first before you help anybody else.
Exactly.
So if your mask is not on, there's no point trying to put everybody else's mask on and then you pass out. And I think as a business owner, we've got to remember put our own mask on first, look after ourselves, our health, our diet. But I really think the exercise part is something that you've got to put as a priority in everything you do, and then base everything else around that. It has to come first.
What about the spiritual side of life? Is that something as well that carries you through?
No, I'm really bad with that. I've had some people ask me, do I meditate? And no, I don't go and sit on a mountain on a rock and look out and make noises and things like that. But I do sit down quietly and just think to myself and try and connect and try and hear what's going on around me and smell the smell and hear the noises and all that. But I wouldn't say that I'm of any religious denomination or anything like that.
I think there's a lot to meditation that many people pass over. I believe actually that meditation carries different perspectives, and I've seen that there's more value from really silencing the mind through action for some people, especially those people that have that type of mind. But my friend, I want to say thank you though, because it's been just 2 years, and getting back onto the conversation with you, you said something in the podcast that stands true today. You said a couple of things actually, but one of the things you spoke about is you get onto the podcast with someone, you're having a conversation with them, and you've built a relationship like no other. It's really intriguing. And today you're a great representation of that. So in that, we've had that conversation a couple of years ago, and here we are today speaking as though we dropped off just yesterday.
I know. Hasn't it gone fast?
I'm telling you, unfortunately, the gray hairs, their rhythm isn't as on par as I was hoping it would be, right? So the 2 years have shown gray hairs on my side.
Yeah, mine too. It's I reckon another 2 years and I will be completely grey.
Wow. And again, it's inspirational as well to know that you've continued on your journey, both as a podcaster and as someone who is investing in themselves. So I want to say thank you for that, Tyson. You said something. You said every day is an opportunity to learn one new thing, and I do appreciate that. In closing, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
No, I think I was listening to a podcast recently, and the guy said something and I just went, it's just so true. And he said, every emotion, you're always going to have ups and downs, and every feeling that you have now will pass. So if you're having a bad day, it will pass. If you're having an absolutely fantastic day and you're on top of the moon, don't worry, that will pass. You're going to have ups and downs, ebbs and flows. And I think the sooner people realize that it's not always perfect, but it's not always bad either, I think life just gets easier. I think it gets better when you understand that.
Amazing audience. Again, you're hearing it live from Tyson Franklin. You can check him out at tysonfranklin.com. Tyson, my friend, thank you for being on What Is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.